Hi there, and welcome back to Before Dieting. I'm your host, Bronwyn Fletcher. Over the holidays, there have been a number of new listeners join the podcast, so a welcome to anyone who's new here. And if you are new to my podcast, here's the quick version. I started out as a registered nurse and midwife, and then spent years applying systems thinking to complex corporate problems. So now I get the joy of bringing those two worlds together in the Waiting for Happiness project. Because women's health, and especially the hidden drivers behind eating and weight, has always been the work that I've wanted to do. So what's in store for the 2026 version of Before Dieting? Well, the short bite-sized instructional episodes that you're used to listening to, those will keep going. And we'll also continue along with the systems thinking roadmap that helps you remove those blockages to the permanent weight loss that you're looking for. That investigative work will always remain at the core of this podcast. But this year, you'll also hear new voices. Alongside our continued focus on understanding your eating system and why weight loss stops working, there will be interviews with practitioners and researchers in the broader landscape of women's health. We'll even be covering some of the topics that you, again, may not actually relate immediately to health. There will be an episode on circadian rhythms. So some really interesting speakers are going to be coming onto the program, so I hope you stick with it. But let's get down to today's topic. In an earlier episode, I gave a very brief overview of the Waiting for Happiness 8 types of eating. And in this episode, I really want to dig deeper into that. I've had a lot of questions about the 8 types of eating, so I think it's timely that we start off the year with this topic. Recognizing that we've got a number of new listeners, it's about anyone who's been working on losing weight for a while. There is a tendency for all of us to sort eating into categories of good food or bad, or dieting or overeating. But the problem is when everything gets judged through such a narrow lens, that gives those yappy, judgmental voices a real opportunity to get in and start causing chaos. They're constantly asking questions like, was my eating today good or bad? Did I stick with the diet or not? And of course, the extension of that is, today, have I been good or bad? It's really a problem because life doesn't work in binaries and neither does your eating. And when we stick with that kind of binary thinking to keep things simple, and let's face it, the brain likes simple, it doesn't really work because real change doesn't come from squeezing your eating into fewer categories. It comes from opening up to a greater range of descriptions, ones with more detail, so there are more options for change. It might be that you can make some tweaks to things as opposed to big fundamental shifts in change. So the point of this episode is I really want to make the case for you to ditch that old binary model and to replace it. And to do that, I want to give you an expanded model that can actually be more insightful. The first problem with this cramming entire relationship with food into 2 categories, whether you're good on a diet or being bad and overeating, is that there is no in-between. And that way of thinking leaves absolutely no room to fully understand what's going on. It just keeps you stuck, bouncing back and forth. So if we want to shift this black and white 2 options thinking, we actually have to replace it. We want something that's full color. We want a detailed map of all the different types of eating. And through the project and through those conversations with those 1,000 women that I keep talking about, I've come up with 8 different types of eating. And it's not to say there aren't other types of eating or some of them have a big overlap, but it's really about trying to change our thinking and getting some tools that you can dig deep into your eating and to get a better understanding of it. Otherwise, without an understanding that's broader, as I've said, you go back and you're into that judgmental, yappy voice thing. But I also want to point out that this is not about giving you a new diet, not at all. It's about giving you a new set of criteria so that you can see all of your eating behaviours with much more clarity. So let's start building this new understanding with the first one, which I call functional eating. And it's good to think about this type of eating as like your baseline, right? It covers the breakfast, the lunch and the dinners. It's the kind of eating you do where the food is for fuel and energy. That's not to say that it's not being shaped by unspoken rules that you've picked up throughout your life, and particularly at your family dinner table when you were growing up. But it's actually about the default kind of setting. And this is the type of eating that diets address. They want you in your functional eating through breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They want you to cut down on certain things, calories in particular. But it might be that, you want to eat certain things at certain times and eat between this time and that time. So diets really address the functional eating. The next type of eating that's up is secondary eating. And I usually find this one's a real eye-opener for women. So secondary eating basically includes treats and snacks, but it also includes everything you eat around your functional meals. And often a lot of stuff that gets consumed, we don't even register it as actual eating, but the calories still count. So what are some examples of this secondary eating? So does any of this sound familiar? What about finishing off the last few bites of your kid's dinner? How about repeating sampling of what you're cooking? And of course, one of my favourites as a baker, licking the beaters after you've been baking. So you need to think about secondary eating as these invisible bites, the sort of things that never make it into a food journal or a tracking app, but they absolutely add up. It's such an underrated type of eating that there is a 21-point questionnaire in the Waiting for Happiness program just to open your mind to these moments of these invisible eating. So the next category we're going to talk about are really two sides of the same coin, and that's dieting, which we're all familiar with, but we've added into that constrained eating. And the way that I want to differentiate between the two is that dieting is a bit more formal, like it is external rules, maybe a start date, an end date, where constrained eating is different. It's that constant monitoring and vigilance around food that many of us do between diets. It's like a personal internal rule book that can be enacted at any time. You're going out for dinner, you might actually do something throughout the day, that kind of thing. And it's usually accompanied by a particular voice in your head, that one that keeps tally every single day. The other thing that I discovered when I was talking to women about constrained eating is I found there were a number of them that like to constrain their eating and use that saved calories almost like a bank account. So it might be that they would skip meals to save up the calories so they could spend it later in the day. There was one particular woman I spoke to, and she would always skip breakfast because she knew she'd get hungry at 4:00 in the afternoon. So she thought if she skipped breakfast, she could actually use those calories at 4:00 in the afternoon. The trouble is that trying to be good in this way can entail, first of all, endless mind traffic negotiation, and it often backfires with overeating. The next type of eating is social. And this is when things get more complicated because other people enter the picture. It's the type of eating when others' eyes are on you. And of course, that's the thing about social eating, isn't it? It's done with others. But if you actually have issues around food and eating in front of others, suddenly that social environment, it isn't just about choices for what you might want to eat, about for hunger or what you'd like. Those decisions might be shaped by fear of judgment and imagined opinions. You might end up ordering salad because it looks like the right thing to do. And it's not uncommon for women to eat before or after a social occasion so they don't look too hungry. But whatever the changes are, it's because the changes are needed because women feel like they're being watched. And that's not comfortable for anybody. Okay, let's move on to comfort eating. And this is about soothing some kind of emotional ache, let's call it. We reach for specific foods to calm ourselves, maybe to fill a void or to reconnect with a sense of safety. Here's what it might sound like if we talk about it in story form. Say you've had one of those days when you've got off to a late start. The kids have gone feral. You missed an important meeting. So all day the stress has been piling up. You can think about it that's like being a trigger. On the way home, you grab a tub of ice cream while doing the shopping. You tell yourself you'll just have a little, but then you're back at the freezer and back again, and before you know it, the tub is empty. Then a memory hits you. You're 7 years old, you've had your tonsils out, and you're at your grandmother's house, and she's been giving you ice cream to soothe your sore throat and make you feel better. So the ice cream works because that emotional wiring is still active decades later. But now let's talk about another type of emotional eating, but this one being completely different, and that's what I call relief eating. This type of eating, while it may be called emotional eating, it's not a conscious choice where comfort eating can be. This one, it's almost like a trance state. And you're not choosing to eat to feel better. It's your body eats until an internal imbalance is resolved. And so the goal isn't comfort. It's actually relief in the true sense and every sense of that word. In a previous episode, I talked about hunger, and hungering and the difference between the two. The hungering is what really belongs in this relief eating pattern. So let's look at the last type of eating and really what the goal of the Waiting for Happiness project is. And that is to get you to a place where you are eating consciously. But conscious eating isn't another set of rules. It's not about dividing the foods into good and bad. It's the ability to be present and make deliberate choice. And whether you want to choose the salad, the chocolate, or both, the difference is that you are choosing. And it's slightly different from mindful eating, which is also really helpful, particularly as you get further down the track. But mindful eating is about awareness, usually while you're eating, maybe a little bit before, whether you're full and so on. Conscious eating is awareness of your history, the rules that you're operating, and the reasons before you eat. So it's understanding the why behind the what. So what do you think you can do with this new model of 8 types of eating? Well, first of all, by making the invisible visible, like particularly that secondary eating that I spoke about, if you're able to name the type of eating that you're doing, then you can regain some agency over food and your eating. But this isn't about just giving you a whole lot more new information because, as we've discussed before, there's just so much information out there. It's overwhelming. I want you to think about this as giving you a map that you can use to navigate your daily eating. So let me finish this ep with a question, one that sits right at the heart of our work to remove the blockages to permanent weight loss. And that is, what eating type contributes most to your weight gain? Leave a comment, let me know. I'd really be interested to hear what you think it is for you after listening to this episode. Now, if you want a copy of the 8 types of eating, I've put one in the free resources on the front page of the Waiting for Happiness website. And if you've gotten something out of this episode, please share it with a friend. We've got a whole lot of new listeners. And I want to welcome you and thanks for joining. And by giving it a rating, for example, other women can find it. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk with you next week.